January 20th, 1995, Philippine and U.S. investigators learned that Ramzi Youssef, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and their fellow plotters were actually planning three different attacks when they were foiled in early January. In addition to the planned assassination of the Pope John Paul II and the first phase of Operation Bojinka previously discovered, they also planned to crash about a dozen passenger planes into prominent U.S. buildings. It is often mistakenly believed that there is one Bojinka plan to blow up some planes and crash them into buildings. But in fact, these different forms of attack are to take place in two separate phases. Philippine investigator Colonel Rodolfo Mendoza learns about the second phase through the examination of recently captured Bojinka plotter Abdul Hakim Murad. On January 20th, Mendoza writes a memo about Murad's latest confession saying, with regards to their plan to dive crash a commercial aircraft at CIA headquarters, subject alleged that the idea of doing same came out during the casual conversation with Youssef, and there is no specific plan yet for its execution. What the subject has in mind is that he will board any American commercial aircraft pretending to be an ordinary passenger. Then he will hijack said aircraft, control its cockpit, and dive it at the CIA headquarters. He will use no bomb or explosives. It is simply a suicide mission that he is very much willing to execute. 2 weeks later, Abdul Hakim Murad is being again investigated for his role in the Bojinka plot and interviewed by Colonel Rodolfo Mendoza. He mentions that he had pilot training in the United States and that 10 other operatives are being trained to fly in the country. The second wave of the Bojinka plot required many suicide pilots. Mendoza will later recall that Murad remarked to him, there is really formal training going on of suicide bombers. He said that there were other Middle Eastern pilots training, and he discussed with me the names and flight training schools they went to. Murad also mentioned some of the targets he had picked, including CIA headquarters, the Pentagon, and an unidentified nuclear facility, the World Trade Center, the Capitol, and the Sears Tower. The 10 other men who he met at U.S. flight schools or were getting similar training came from various countries such as the Sudan, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan. The names of these men have never been publicly released, but apparently none of them matched the names of any of the 9/11 hijackers. The Associated Press will later report the FBI interviewed people at the flight schools highlighted by the Philippine police, but did not develop evidence that any of them or other Middle Easterners other than Murad were directly plotting terrorism. With no other evidence of a threat, they took no further action. Murad also revealed that between November of 91 and July of 92, he had trained at 4 different flight schools in the United States. His friend and roommate was Nasir Ali Mubarak, and another man named Abdallah Nasser Youssef were roommates with Murad as they trained at the same schools at the same time. Mubarak appears to be one of Murad's 10 pilots because he had served in the United Arab Emirates Air Force, and the Associated Press mentioned one of the 10 was a former soldier in the United Arab Emirates. Richard Kaler, the manager of Richmore Aviation in Albany, New York, later said that the FBI agents interviewed him in '96 about 3 other men who studied at the school as well. He says he was told that the FBI was first alerted to the flight school after a Richmond business card was found in the Philippines apartment where Murad, Youssef, and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed had lived, but that there was the only time the FBI interviewed him on these matters before 9/11. An assistant manager at Richmore will later say of Murad and his roommates, supposedly they didn't know each other. They just happened to show up here at the same time, but they all obviously knew each other. The FBI investigates Mubarak in '95 and does not find that he has any ties to terrorism. Mubarak will continue to live openly and work in the United States, marrying an American woman. He will claim the FBI never interviewed him until hours after the 9/11 attacks. So apparently, the 10 men named by Murad may not have been interviewed in '95 after all. He will be deported in 2002, apparently solely on his association with Abdul Hakim Murad 10 years earlier. Nothing more is publicly known about Abdullah Nasser Youssef. Murad will also mention to the FBI months later that future 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed had a valid U.S. visa and had been thinking about learning to fly in the U.S. Murad says he recommended Richmore Aviation to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. There appears to have been little knowledge of Murad's 10 pilot claims inside U.S. intelligence before 9/11. For instance, FBI agent Ken Williams out of Phoenix will not mention it in his July 2001 memo about suspected militants training in flight schools.